The German army that invaded the Soviet Union in 1941 was massive, the largest invading force ever assembled to that point. But a year later, that force was stretched out over a huge front line, over 2,000 kilometers long. Army Group North's siege of Leningrad was in full swing, and Army Group Center was under constant attack from Soviet forces around the city of Rzhev. This meant, for this supposedly war-winning offensive, Army Group South could only pull together 72 German divisions, around 1 million men. The operation, codenamed Fall Blau or Case Blue, took place in stages. First, Axis forces would break through Soviet lines, capture the city of Voronezh, and encircle the Soviet forces in eastern Ukraine. Having destroyed them, Army Group South would then split in two. Army Group B would race to Astrakhan to create a blocking line across the rivers Don and Volga, before Army Group A turned south towards the oil fields of Maikop and Grozny. Having captured the farmlands of eastern Ukraine and the oil fields of the Caucasus, Hitler believed that Germany would have the resources it needed to stay in the war and take the fight to the US. Additionally, by denying those resources to his enemy, he hoped to cause a collapse in the Soviet war machine. The following year, it was great in theory, but the plan had multiple flaws. Both army groups were now instructed to go for their objectives at the same time. While Army Group A raced off towards the Caucasus, Army Group B was given a new task before setting up their blocking line from Astrakhan along the Don. Friedrich von Paulus's Sixth Army was expected to take the city of Stalingrad, from which they could intercept Soviet oil shipments moving up the Volga. Splitting his forces like this was risky, but Hitler was so confident in victory he actually took units away from Army Group South and sent them to Army Group Center and North. The troops left to carry out these new orders did not have things easy. Army Group B, on the other hand, was slowed by logistical problems and by Soviet forces finally starting to get their act together. The Red Army held von Paulus's men for 3 weeks, taking terrible casualties but inflicting heavy attrition on the German forces as well. This then forced Adolf Hitler to divert units from Army Group A to speed things up. Only when they arrived was the Sixth Army able to resume its advance. After crossing the Don on August 23rd, they reached the northern suburbs of Stalingrad the following day, and there they were in for the fight of their lives. The Battle of Stalingrad began with a huge barrage of the city, reducing it to rubble. This took a terrible toll on the civilian population, but failed to destroy the city's defenses and caused more problems than it solved. The ruined buildings and rubble-strewn streets hindered the German advance while favoring the Soviets. By the end of September, the city had turned into a meat grinder, one of huge propaganda value. Hitler became obsessed with the city's capture, pouring more and more men into the fight, while Stalin himself expanded huge losses, ensuring his city did not fall. Outside of Stalingrad, the Red Army mounted constant counterattacks. They failed to break through, but Axis forces were stretched thinner and thinner. Further south, Army Group A was also running into stiff Soviet resistance, and with most of its aircraft diverted to Stalingrad, the Soviet Air Force now had the upper hand. Worst of all, though, were the logistical problems which affected all of Army Group South. There were only 3 single railway lines towards Stalingrad, which weren't fully converted to the German gauge. Despite running at full capacity, there was a huge tailback of trains waiting to get to the city. This left the Sixth Army with shortages of ammunition, food, fuel, and spare parts for its tanks and aircraft. Paulus was hamstrung. He needed more manpower to take the city, but he could barely supply the men he already had, a problem the Soviets did not encounter. As winter arrived and snow began to fall, Army Groups A and B were running out of steam. Unable to capture them, the Luftwaffe was forced to bomb the oil fields at Grozny to deny them to the Soviets. Meanwhile, the Sixth Army in Stalingrad was exhausted, their units fighting on empty. Still, by mid-November, they had captured 90% of the city, while Soviet forces clung on by their fingernails to thin strips of land along the Volga. Conditions on all sides were grim.